pleasure for me to be sat up here with Jnanadhara, Vajratara and Vajrashura. We've already heard more from Vajratara and Vajrashura, and we'll hear a talk from Jnanadhara tonight. But yeah, really nice to have the three of you together to be a bit more in dialogue with one another. And what we'll be talking about is been titled on our programme, The Path of Responsibility. So exploring this question of responsibility, of which these three all hold and have held within our movement for some time. And also it sort of fits into the theme of our retreat in terms of lineage as well. We could talk about responsibility as a lineage, something that's passed from one person to the next. Often with roles we'll mark that ritually, whether it's a chair or a mitra convener or whatever it is. There'll be a ritual passing on of responsibility. So we'll explore that a little bit together and some questions around that. But perhaps we could just start with a little bit of a potted history of your experience, your sort of path, your own particular paths of responsibility within Triratna. Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can start if you like. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this. I think in a way it just arises from, like, it's not like all of a sudden you take responsibility. I think it starts with just, you think, I really like what's going on here. I wonder if I can help in some way. And then you start helping in some way. And then you start helping a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. Then it gets maybe more complex. Well, it does get more complex. The sort of sphere of your activity might become bigger. But it's just, I think that's the basic intention, or that runs through, in a way, right from the very first moment I came along. Just wanting to sort of, just appreciating what's going on and wanting to participate in some way. So I've done various things. Like I worked for quite a long time ago now at Windhorse Trading. I worked as a sales rep, which is not what I thought I'd going to be doing in my life. But I was selling wind chimes and oil burners and other funky things, picture frames, mosaic mirrors, all this kind of stuff. I mean, what was maybe significant about that is I found myself doing something that I would never otherwise done, because I was involved in this movement. It needed to be done, and I could do it. And in a way, that was quite a helpful thing for me personally, because I realised I could do things which I wasn't temperamentally suited to, and that was really helpful. Anyway, that's another topic. And then I found myself in Dublin, and a typical experience, which you maybe had too, was literally like the chair of the Buddhist Centre was like, I'm going to finish up as chair. And I remember literally, it was an order meeting. There weren't that many order members in Dublin. Literally looking around the room and thinking, oh, there's no one to do this, because it was clear that, and I thought, oh, actually, I could do it. And I thought, a moment after that, I thought, actually, I kind of want to do it. And then I found myself working for the Dublin Buddhist Centre for 14 years, and 12 of which I was the chair. So that's kind of happened for me. And then more recently, I've taken on this a movement-wide responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. I think a lot of that resonates with me. I think from very early days of just wanting to be at the heart of things. I think there's temperamental desire to sort of join in, and also really seeing the value of the Dharma. So I think actually the first time that really expressed itself was it was the early days of Buddhafield, which was very much related to the South London Centre, which I was part of. And is a really wonderful opportunity to work together. So I remember working in the burger vans and veggie burger vans and on festivals and things like that. And then going to university, I went to Leeds University and helping out at the Buddhist. Well, actually, I remember going to my freshers' fair, and Samanata had the stall for the University Buddhist Meditation Society. And he said, I knew him already because I was already a Buddhist, but he said, just come under here, just climb under here, because you're going to have to be the president. And I was like, Samanata, I don't even know where the toilets are in this union building. And he was like, it's fine, the toilets are just down there to the left. You could just crawl under this table. And and that was that. So a lot of the kind of responsibility of like, who else is going to do this? And yeah, and then I mean, gosh, so many things like that where you just see a need and you respond very fully. So Buddha field, and then working in the evolution shop, so selling the wind chimes and the picture frames and the mosaic mirrors. And I think that was really positive for me, because those shops were a real context for anyone who wanted to get more involved. You could instantly have a job, which was, I know many of us benefited from that, and are still actually benefiting from the money that they raised, because Tiratnaloka has just been given £500,000 by the money that was raised, quite a long time ago, from Windhorse Trading. So. And then after that, moving to Sheffield and working it's like you kind of get involved and you think, oh great, there's all these people that I can be with who are more senior to me and I can really learn something from, and then they all kind of disappear one by one, and you're like, oh, suddenly you're manager of of the evolution shop. So evolution shop, and then becoming a Mitra convener. And I remember when I was Mitra convener in Sheffield, I had a sense, strangely, even though I loved my life, I really loved my life, something in me knew that it wasn't enough. And I remember doing my meditation practice of Vajratara and saying to myself in meditation, I know this isn't quite enough, and whatever I'm ready to take the next step, you just show me what it is. Like, never say that to a bodhisattva, because unless you really mean it, because something will happen very shortly afterwards. And about the next week, I remember Ratnadharani asked me to move and join the ordination team, and I thought, oh well, that's that then. So and then again, being asked to take on further responsibility. I think there's a kind of dual recognition that something needs to be done, that I can do it, and then the wanting to do it kind of catches up a bit later. I could do this. Oh, actually, I think it would be a good thing. And I'm just want to say also, I'm really happy that that's happened. Like, that's always. I've just lived such a rich life, of which I'm so grateful. So I've also been grateful for those opportunities. It can sound like a burden, but I haven't experienced it like that in any way, actually. Yeah.
Great, yeah. I'd echo that, but for me, I think as well, there's always been something of the attraction of working with really good people throughout my life as well. So when I came across Buddhism, I was doing a master, across meditation, I was doing a master's, and as I was getting more into Buddhism, I was doing a PhD, which I realized then, thanks to Buddhism, that I had no interest in, and I dropped out. Buddhism has claimed a lot of PhD students, I'm afraid. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life then, but I knew I didn't want to work for the man. You know what I mean? I didn't want to earn money. I'd worked various jobs. I remember one time I was working in New York for a summer on a summer visa, and this guy was like Gordon Gekko out of Wall Street. Have you ever seen the film? He's a real capitalist embodiment, and his trading company is called Wolf Trading. And he gave me a talk one time about how people were sheep and needed to be fleeced and stuff like this. And he really turned me off working in the world, to be honest. So I was kind of drifting, and I thought, what'll I do with my life? And I was forming friendships in the Sangha, and someone said, do you want to come on a Karana appeal? And Andy Black, if you remember him. Oh, yeah. And it was always the attraction of working with really good people that drew me into the path of responsibility. And then Karna Daka, who was working in the Buddhist Centre in Dublin, was saying, do you want to come and work with me? And I was like, yeah, I really want to come and work with you. And then, later responsibility, like becoming a Mitra convener, was like, yeah, I want to be around Padmavajra more. I want to be with Mitra conveners who seem like really good people, and go to Padmaloka. And then I was asked to join the college, and it was like, yeah, I want to be around my spiritual heroes, and work with them. So it's always that kind of attraction as well of working with really good people that's attracted me to the path of responsibility too. And like Vajratara and Jnanadhara, I've no regrets about giving my life to it. It's always been just a really, really incredible and rewarding path. But there is that thing as well, that you start working And next thing you look around and you're the most experienced in the room, and not at the college level, but at the other levels. These days in Dublin, I'm just kind of in the background, and I feel my job there is supporting the rest of the team, the newer members of the team, to really flower in their own way as well, and support them to that. So, and that's also the path of responsibility. Supporting other people to replace you too.
Mm-hmm. Great. So in a way, you've mentioned, in terms of taking responsibility, you've mentioned lots of different things, from taking responsibility for a shop selling mosaic mirrors to being a mitra convener, to ordaining people, to the actual activities look very different within that. Maybe you could, and they're not necessarily all jobs. That there are different things in there, and obviously not some people in this room work for the movement, and not everyone, even if everyone in the room wanted to, probably we couldn't all immediately. So, what in essence does it mean to take responsibility? What's the kind of thread that holds those things together? Anyone want to answer that?
I could have a go. I mean, actually, Vajratara said it last night she talked about creating conditions for friendship. So sometimes I used to think about it as you're creating conditions for other people to practice the Dharma. I mean, engage with the three jewels. It's really, so, and weirdly, when you do that, you start realizing that creating conditions for other people to go deeper into the three jewels is part of oneself going deeper into the three jewels. It's like, I mean, Bante's got this really great phrase, well, I like it, is the altruistic dimension of going for refuge. So there is this dimension of going for refuge, which is altruism, which is helping other people. And it's you don't really have complete going for refuge without it. It's not like it's an optional extra, it's intrinsic to the process. So anyway, that's probably enough.
I guess the thought I have is that for me, it's just being clear about how much I've benefited from what people have done for me, and just really wanting to make sure that those opportunities are there for other people. Maybe it's built into Katanyata. Katanyata is the Buddhist word for when we're aware of how we've benefited. It's a translation of gratitude, but I think it's a bit more specific. It's kind of just being aware of how much you have benefited yourself from other people's activities. And then you can't really do that with any kind of mindfulness without realizing or without wanting other people to have that same experience, and looking at, well, how are they going to have that other experience? And even if you don't feel you can do things, or you haven't got the capacity, or it looks tricky, or you're really full already, or you feel like, but it's really important that people have these experiences, actually, to have a vivid experience of the Dharma, and like the altruistic element. So for me, it's always been like, I really want people to have the same fortune that I've had in Triratna, because I feel very fortunate in Triratna to just have been blessed by Dharma and friendships and good conditions,
Yeah, I mean, both those things. But it's interesting that it comes like responsibility. The heart of responsibility is, it's emotion. That's what's going to move us. Is that emotion of gratitude? It's not a worked out plan of I'm going to get involved, and then I'm going to become a mitra, get ordained, and then I'm going to be a mitra convener, and then I'm going to be a preceptor. It's not a
10-year plan.
Yeah, a 10-year plan. It's a kind of responsiveness for like one's own gratitude or katanyata, meeting the needs of the situation, whatever those are. And I find that really thrilling, because you don't actually know what's going to happen next. And also within that is my own internal sort of practice, and what I need as well comes into that. So there's a lot of conditions that come together, and how the path of responsibility will emerge is sometimes quite unknown. And I think delightfully so, actually. I'm interested in that in myself, and I'm interested in that in other people as well. And I remember Bhante saying something about, he said, you can't help others unless you're a person of considerable spiritual development. Full stop. But you're not going to be a person of considerable spiritual development unless you help others. So, and that's what you were talking about. It sort of sounds terribly altruistic, but altruism, he says, altruism and individualism at that point coincide. There is something in us as well that really benefits from those things. And I know that I definitely, I can remember the point where I had this reflection actually, where I really knew I wanted my entire life to be about Buddhist practice, because anything less, I'm subject to such strong internal forces that anything less than a complete Buddhist life, I don't think I could have managed myself. So I remember just having this desire, I want to, a real wholehearted Buddhist life in all areas of life. I know not everyone feels like that, but that was definitely true of me. I don't think anything less could have contained the emotions that I feel.
So it's you sort of talking about taking responsibility in the context of practice as a practice. Of course, what that looks like might not be the kind of thing that we always think of in terms of Buddhist practice. It might be sending emails. It might be packing up mosaic mirrors. In what particular ways have you found it kind of fruitful in terms of what you might consider personal practice? Where are the particular growth areas that taking responsibility has enabled, or what might not have got touched so much in your life had it not been for holding responsibility?
I can go. Maybe just to say one thing first, and it links to the last point as well, is that for me, I'm fundamentally lazy. Okay, I'm just lazy, and I think another way to look at the state of unenlightenment is the state of laziness. Yeah, so if I'm left to my own devices, I'm just going to be lazy. And I'm probably doing my meditation each day, and one of the big pitfalls I think for Buddhism and meditation practice in particular, I call it the 2-year gap or 2-year point, where you can kind of meditate, you can kind of make your life and your mental states reasonably good. You can make life kind of work okay. Most people, not everyone, but most people can. And that's the point at which I think unless you have some kind of responsibility beyond yourself, you're probably just going to slide into a private life, of Buddhist practice. So for me, responsibility has always demanded more of me and forced me to work against my laziness. One teaching I've always found really useful is, I'm not sure how aware people are of Bhante's teaching on the spiritual significance of problems. So a problem is where you have two irreconcilable tensions in your life, or pulls in your life, that you can't reconcile easily. And he differentiates it from difficulties. A difficulty is just something you have to work out that's challenging. But a problem is where you have two things that just cannot be reconciled on their own level. And in this case, like Vajratara was saying, it's practice for oneself and practice for other people. And the path of responsibility has forced me to stay with that tension. So Bhante's point is that you stay with the heat of that tension. And the heat of that tension kind of makes your being more molten and soft, and things can shift much more quickly and deeply than they would otherwise. And you kind of have to stay with this burning hot coal in your throat. And for me, with the path of responsibility, it's been the need and the desire to help, and then my own inadequacies to be able to do that, and it's forced me to practice more, and it's forced me to look at deeper solutions than I would if it was just about me, myself. I can put up, I can happily live with my own unskillful states, but it's really embarrassing for my spiritual friends to see that. You know what I mean? So I'll do it to keep them happy, in a way, because I'm lazy, So I think the path of responsibility forces you to go beyond what you'd normally do with your own practice. And you have to sit with that tension of the need and your own inadequacies to meet that need. And I think that brings you to a much deeper understanding. And I found that again and again and again. And then the other thing I'll say is that I remember very strongly, a couple of years after I was ordained, being asked to be a KM to someone. And I remember thinking, okay, I really have to up my practice here. My Dharma life is no longer my own. And I mean that in a really positive sense, that it's not just my own practice. And I got that even more becoming a private preceptor and even more becoming a public preceptor, I have to be really as exemplary as I can be. And I'm not as exemplary as I can be, but I'm a bit more exemplary because of the path of responsibility. And I mean that in a really deeply positive way, that you have to practice for other people then when you have responsibility. So I think, do you get what I'm getting at? That it kind of draws the best out of you. The need draws the best out of you. Yeah. And just on a purely selfish level, that's why the path of responsibility has been really transformative. And obviously, hopefully, I've had some effect in the world as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really recognise that. I think, and particularly that thing about you become a preceptor or something, or even you become an order member, or even you're an experienced mitra, or you become a mitra, whatever level of responsibility it is, what you do is then magnified, and somehow you're representing to some extent Buddhism itself, and one can feel oppressed by that, or one can see that as a really good opportunity. And I think for me it's been a really good opportunity, because I think, a bit like you, I think there is a kind of laziness where I just retreat into my own unskillful patterns. And I think the thing I've really had to work with over the years is, it's funny, in the path of responsibility, is over responsibility, because I'm also used to taking a lot of responsibility. I took a lot of responsibility in my family context. So I really had to work with the fact that there's a deep kind of view that everything is down to me. So one of the things that's been very, very important to me in the path of responsibility is feeling like I'm working in a team. So it's kind of, and a bit like the problem and difficulty, you can have a difficulty with someone, and it's easy just to sort of maybe just think, I don't like that person and I don't have to engage with it. But if you're working with them and you're reliant on each other, you have to work through difficulties. If you're living with people or working with people on a project. And that brings us into a higher unity, a higher harmony, which, again, I probably wouldn't do if I didn't have to sometimes. And it's really helped me to work against this view that everything is down to me, because it's not, actually. We're working as part of a team. And I think there is a deep wisdom in that. It's to see that, we're not isolated individuals, and what we do has an effect on each other. And I don't have to take responsibility for it on my own. And it's good friends to help with that.
Do you want me to say something as well?
Do you want to?
I do, yeah, I've got something to say.
You don't have to.
No, I mean, in a way, I think, for some reason or other, I think confidence has been a bit of an issue in my life. Just particularly being the confidence to be publicly visible. And what I've found is, if you're responsible for something, you can't avoid being visible. And for me personally, in a way, there's something about the dynamic of needing to articulate what's internal externally in order to be able to fully understand and know what that is. And I've really appreciated the opportunity. It's more than an opportunity, it's almost like the imperative to do that. Because I've been responsible for things, I've had to actually open my mouth and say stuff that, left to my own devices, I would have kept to myself. So yeah, it's been extremely helpful for my own sort of growth as a person, I suppose, to actually have that called forth from me, because a little bit like left to my own devices, to use that phrase, I would just kind of I'd keep to myself. But that hasn't been possible. And in a way, I'm really profoundly grateful for that. Because I've actually done stuff that I didn't. I remember one time, actually, we used to do these trade shows, which was big. I was the trade show manager. So I had to organise all these trucks, big trucks with all this gear, and take them down to London. And I'm a kid from a tiny little town in New Zealand, and London is like pretty intense. Even if you're from there, it's pretty intense, I gather. But and I had to. It was very, very intense. All these different companies would set up their stalls, and it was the one I particularly remember was in Earl's Court in London, and the big was called Top Drawer, and there was basically this big takedown. So what you had is like hundreds of different companies, all with trucks, all with like 4 or 5 hours to take everything down. It's really super intense. It was my responsibility to do this. I was like, I don't know, 24 or something. And it was like, you know, high stakes, and I was nervous about it. In some ways, it was probably just about on the limit of what I should have been doing, if you know what I mean. Maybe slightly beyond, if I'm honest. But I remember at the end of it, when everything was packed into the trucks, all the trucks were on their way back to Cambridge, to the warehouse. I remember feeling like, I've just transcended myself. I didn't think I could do that. And I just did it. And I remember thinking, wow, the phrase literally came into my mind, unpremeditated as it were. I just transcended myself. And I thought, wow, I never would have done that. I never would have thought I could do that. And part of it was because, and I think this is a key thing in taking responsibility, is that other people could see that I could do it. And I had confidence in them. And I think that's probably a key element. I think Bante was exemplary in this, is that he could see people's potential that they couldn't see, and he created an environment where that was drawn out and encouraged people to step up. So I think that's probably a crucial element in this whole area, is that function of a Kalyana Mitra to give confidence by not in something external, but just give confidence by encouraging us to see our own potentials, things that we didn't know we could do.
Great. Can I add one more thing that it's kind of tuning into what Jnanadhara said about the sense of accomplishment, is that it's also been the path of responsibility. I don't want to portray it as all difficulty and problem. It's been some of the most satisfying. It's been one of the most satisfying paths I've ever had. You know, that's the wrong way to put it, but it's just really deeply satisfying to serve something you really believe in, and I think that satisfaction has more than compensated for any kind of difficulties or problems, or it's just been such a satisfying thing to do with my life. I feel really, really like helping people discover the Dharma, even if it's just like cooking on a retreat or washing the dishes after a course. It's just really, really satisfying. It's a hell of a lot easier to clean the toilets for a Buddhist center, for people coming in to have a nice clean space, which I used to do every day in the center when I worked at first, than working for some accountancy firm or something, or IT, which I probably would have ended up in, So it's just so satisfying and rewarding, the path of responsibility. I don't want it to just sound like real pain and dukkha all the time. It can be from time to time, but it's just very satisfying. Yeah, I can't imagine having done anything else in my life, really.
So you've been invoking, the three of you, the responsibility as an antidote to our sort of turning us outwards towards others, as an antidote to our tendency to stay focused on ourselves and our own particular growth. The fact that the context in which we grow is the one in which we actually have to in order to rise to it. But there's, I guess, with that comes, with those are situations of pressure. They're in a way, the responsibility involves us caring about the situation and having to respond to, I don't know, keep it on track or avoid something happening we don't want to happen. So there's a kind of potentially an aspect of stress in that. And, there's always so much more to do. In any situation, you always the idea of what it could be like is always, there's always a big divide from where it actually is now. How does one stop veering to the other extreme? Is there a danger in this of going to the other extreme of just doing stuff and not tending to our own needs? Is that fear legitimate, and how do we make sure that we don't fall into that trap?
Yeah, I could say something. I mean, I think if you're going to sort of coin a phrase, if you're going to work hard, you've got to play hard. And when I say play, I mean in your own Buddhist practice, personal practice, not just around. That's kind of I definitely need to what I call it to myself is my witching time. And I've got to be able to kind of stir up the depths and reflect and meditate and go on solitary retreats. Like that's that I don't sacrifice my meditation practice, not ever. sometimes what I sacrifice is my sleep, but I don't sacrifice my meditation practice. I think the other thing is that it's also working out where energy comes from and inspiration comes from, and keeping, there's a laziness of not keeping one's inspiration alive. So finding out what really helps us be inspired and what really drains us. And one of the things that I realise about myself is that I'm happier when I'm creative. Like, that's what gives me energy, is when I feel creative. It's not necessarily when I just relax. So when I feel creative, I have a lot of energy to give. And what drains my energy is a conflict. So if I feel a sense of conflict about, well, I'm doing this, leading a retreat, or I'm cleaning the toilets, or whatever it is, if there's a conflict between I'm doing this but I want to be doing something else, it's the conflict itself that's draining. It's not leading the retreat or cleaning the toilet. Do you see what I mean? So when I feel slightly drained, I think, okay, where's the conflict? Because it's the conflict itself which drains energy. And then I think, okay, so do I need to be more wholehearted about what I'm actually doing? Just drop the conflict. Or do I need to be doing something else? But it's not actually the work itself that's draining. And the people that I've really learnt this from is actually our Sangha in India, some very, very fine Indians, and there's Indian order members. And I remember talking to them about burnout once, and the concept just doesn't exist in India at all. I just couldn't understand what I was talking about. And I think one of the things that they have also, what I've taught working with Indian order members, is that they don't have guilt. And I think the other thing that's draining is guilt, of feeling like we should be doing something we don't really want to be doing. When they need to work, they work. And when they want to have a good time, they have a good time. We run these huge retreats. I remember the last convention. They ran a whole big convention, which was the conditions in India trying to run an international convention is difficult in the ways we could not possibly understand in this culture. I won't go into it. But so difficult. And at the end of every day, they'd kind of have their little team party, which I was invited to, which was a great privilege in my life, even though I couldn't understand a word of what was going on. And we'd all make egg sabji in the kitchen after it. I mean, and you just have a good time. And just sing songs and delight in being with each other. So they've taught me that when you need to work, you just work. And when you need to go on retreat, my dear friend Amritdeep, and he said things are really tough in India at the moment, really tough conditions for spreading the Dharma. He said, so I decided we needed to do something. And I was like, what, Amritdeep? And he said, I decided we all needed to go on retreat at Shravasti. So Shravasti is really difficult to run a retreat, and it's really doesn't have the kind of facilities that are easy to do. But he decided that all the order members just needed to go on retreat at Shravasti, which is where the Buddha spent most of his life, and reflect on the Buddha. So that's what they did. It was the most inconvenient timing, I must say, for them to do that, because it was in the middle of a college meeting. But I thought, that's the attitude. When the going gets tough, you need to go and spend time with the Buddha. You need to go to Shravasti. Yeah.
I can't match that, but I just remember Padmavajra talking about. I shouldn't get him into trouble, but he was saying one time that when people burn out, it's often that they're not doing enough, actually, in terms of their own practice. So it's kind of just echoing what you said. And for me, I just have to make sure I have retreats programmed in, because I'm kind of not able to look after myself if I don't. It's when I go away on retreats, like this weekend has been really re-inspiring again for my practice, even though it's a short enough weekend. Well, it's a weekend rather than a week or 2 weeks. But I just have to make sure I get away on retreat regularly. If I'm going to do the work in the centre, I have to get away on retreat. It's non-negotiable, And for all of my years, I've usually spent maybe 2 months a year on retreat in total, between retreats I lead and retreats I'm on, maybe sometimes 3 months, So you just have to get away on retreat. You have to get these bursts of inspiration. And you don't really, the danger with the path of responsibility is that you can be very busy and you don't really notice your inspiration kind of being worn down. And Subhuti tells this very well-known story about when order members, he would see a load of order members and they'd come to him and say, oh, I've just lost my way, I don't feel inspired, and I really don't know what the Dharma is about anymore. And the first question he'd ask them is, how long has it been since you've been on retreat? And they would inevitably say, according to him, like 9 months, a year or more. So you just have to make sure that you get these kind of fuel stops. And it's very intangible how it works. The spiritual life's really mysterious, the way these things ebb and flow, but you just have to look after yourself and raise the level of your personal life to match the intensity of your work life. And sometimes we think that, what we need to counter an intense work life is just to watch a DVD box set for hours, to chill out, you know what I mean? And maybe there's a little bit of that's good. I do a bit of it, more than a bit. But, actually a lot of the time it's just to kind of be in a different context where you're inspired again and learn from others and be with other people. So, like the Indians did. Yeah.
I could say something really short. One of the things that I find really helpful is realizing that in order to be of benefit to others, I need to look after myself. Just in terms of like getting a good night's sleep and not eating bad food, and on the sort of more rudimentary level, but also the kind of things that Vajratara and Vajrashura have been talking about. So I have this little phrase like, I'm just going to have a nap for the benefit of all beings. So what I'm basically realizing is that if I'm going to do a good class, if I'm going to be in a good state to do the class in the evening, because I didn't sleep last night, I should have a nap. So I'm realizing that in order to be of benefit to others, I need to look after myself. So saying it in that way to myself, I did this I don't do this anymore, but for a while it really helped me. It's just like, okay, I just need to go to the local cafe, sit and look out the window for half an hour for the benefit of all beings. And it really made a difference to me, actually. But just realizing that if you're in a ropey, uninspired, stressed out state, it's not very attractive. You're sitting at the Buddhist center and you look haggard and you can't think straight because you're so stressed out or whatever. And you're saying, hey, come and get involved in our community. It's amazing. People are looking at you and thinking, hang on, there's a bit of an incongruence there. They won't know it consciously, but they'll pick up on it, So you do want to just, look after yourself for the benefit of all beings.
Somehow much more inspiring to do that, isn't it, as well? Like, sometimes it's hard enough to do the things that we know we need to do to look after ourselves, just if that's the only reason. It's just not very motivating.
Yeah. But it's like the whole thing is like trying to get over this idea that we have that we don't affect other people and other people don't affect us, and we're kind of discreet. So whatever way you can get over that, get over it, if you know what I mean. Like whatever. I mean, that's just a particular way I found to do it. But I think that, we've already said it, but that's what's so transformative is because you're challenging that view, and it is a view, but you're challenging it not just in a cognitive way, but in terms of your activity. And I think that's what's so wonderful about Triratna is it's an invitation to engage in a dynamic community where you're challenging something that's so fundamental, which is this, what gets called a fixed view of self and all the rest of it. But it's like a context in which you do that rather than just a sort of a private sort of cognitive game. It's much deeper than that.
And can I just mention something? It's really important to distinguish as well between being stretched and being overwrought. You know what I mean? I think you should, like the one of the main benefits for oneself, at least, of the path of responsibility is that it stretches you. So stretching is normal. Yeah, it's not a sign you're doing anything wrong, but it's when you start to get overwrought or burnt out that you have to start really being careful then.
Well, and also, I mean, one of the things, listen to your friends, talk to your friends and listen to your friends. And if they say to you, hey, look, Jnanadhara, you're not, Vajrashura does this, he's very, very good. He gets on my case about going on retreats. And it's really good, actually, because sometimes you need somebody else to tell you, hey, look, do you realise that you're starting to get a bit thin? So ask your friends, listen to your friends, seek out their counsel. I remember actually, back in 1996, I had just come along, and it just so happened that Bhante visited Wellington, and we're sitting around in the community with Bhante. I didn't have a clue who the man was, other than he started this whole thing. I'm like, okay. it was wonderful actually. And I remember getting quite animated around the table, the dinner table. And I actually asked Bante, how do you know if you're kind of pushing too hard or not pushing hard enough, as it were, or you're putting, and he said, listen to your friends. That's what he said. He said, the finger came out. He says, and he said, they'll tell you if you need to go away on a holiday or if you need to give a kick in the pants. That's what he said. In a very playful kind of way, very playful. Yeah. So anyway, there's a little bit of wisdom from Bante from almost a long time ago.
So maybe bringing it to the reason that we're all here in terms of the Young People's Project, which is one of the ways I think the three of you got to know each other in your involvement right in the beginning of the Young People's Project. Why did you want to do that? Why was that a particular thing that you wanted to take responsibility for? Why is it that you're now wanting to be here on this retreat, which you all, according to Kshantikara, readily agreed to and wanted to respond to? What is it about?
We're very afraid of Kshantikara.
Right? What is it about this particular project that kind of inspires the desire to to take responsibility?
I can tell one story. I used to be, when I was training for ordination, I had no real peers. I was in my 20s. I got ordained just after my 30th birthday, and I had no peers in the ordination process, my own age, in Dublin. And I used to be in this GF4 group with a bunch of quite older guys. Jnanadhara's giggling away. And they were quite a lot older, and I used to really, really set them off. They used to just, anytime I was just wanted to be really gung-ho and throw myself at the wall and throw myself into the Dharma. And they would be all like, you're just young, give me a pat on the head. And I used to really annoy them because I was young and they were old. And it just really didn't work, really, really didn't work. And I used to feel ill cycling to this GF4 group because I just hated it so much. And I just left basically one day. Then I said, I'm not doing it anymore. And for me, that was just a typical kind of experience of a certain type of loneliness I experienced in the centre, which I'm sure many of you have as well if you don't have a vibrant young Buddhist situation. And it wasn't like Dublin was awful. There's plenty of people in their 30s and so on coming along, but in terms and even in their 20s, but there was very few people that asked for ordination my age. And you do need to be met with people. Sangha is a meeting where you meet people who've made a similar who have expressed similar aspirations to you. And it's a very magical thing, that meeting. That kind of resonance that happens, and I don't think we can do without it actually, and that's what keeps people here. And if we don't have that, it'll just be very difficult, like it was for me. So it was really clear, really straight away, why we needed a Young Buddhist project as a result, and that's why I didn't quite join in the first year or two, but then I started getting involved. I think I was too busy with Dublin, but it was really great to be involved. Yeah, and then once I came along, it was just the energy of it and the vitality of it and the fun in it was just really addictive. And also Lokabandhu had showed this really set of alarming graphs that the order would be dead by 2030 or something. Also, I'm still very passionate about the Young Buddhist project as well, if I could just add, because I really don't want me and Vajratara and Jnanadhara to be the only college members alive in 30 years' time. I'm slightly joking, but I'm slightly not either. Because we need like Pranikashi has always been very strong on us that well, maybe I shouldn't say this because I don't want to put pressure on people, but we do need to think about who's going to be leaders in the order in 30 years' time. You know what I mean? And I never thought I'd be a public preceptor. I've only ever been stunned in my life twice, and once was when I was asked to ordain someone, and once was when I was asked to be in the college. I never thought I'd be or at least I thought I'd be like 60 by the time I joined the college if I ever joined it. But actually, the need is there, and you never know. There might be many members of the future college here for all you know. You know what I mean? So that's why the Young Buddhist Project is really important too. That we need the leaders of 20, 30 years' time. We need to think strategically if we're going to really spread the Dharma in the West, or in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I had some similar experiences. Or you go on retreat. I remember going on retreat to Mount Loka and and then people would work out how old I was, and then they would try and be my mother. Oh God, I've already got a mother, and she takes up, like she's quite a full person in my life. So I didn't want to be that. So there's that side of it, and the other side of it is that like, how can I describe it? I mean, I really enjoyed it when I first joined in those young people's events, and we used to have such a good laugh, and in all sorts of there's just a lot of energy, as you all know, and real friendships that can emerge out of that. But it's also I suppose as I get older, I kind of want to communicate to myself that I've lived such a wonderful life. Like this is like I've lived such a good life. I honestly think that if I die tomorrow, that's fine, because I've just done the best that I can with my life, and I really genuinely feel that. So I think there's something unique about the Young Persons Project, where people are at a stage of life where they're making decisions about the future of their life. And what I would like people to have is a certain amount of realistic choice about how to practice the Dharma in different situations. There's a bit more openness, before responsibilities are sort of piled on. And in a way, I want to kind of share the gift of my own life and what I've done with my life. So in that way, it's not about being, I suppose there's something unique I can contribute, because I've been a Buddhist since I was 17, and this fact is trotted out, and occasionally people, it's not that important to me in some ways, but it has given me a unique perspective. It has given me a perspective for someone who's practiced the Dharma and put myself in the conditions of the Dharma for, most of my adult life. And I think I can share something from that, which I find quite exciting. I think partly also I still think I am in my 20s, as I was saying in the team meeting. But yeah, and I remember sometimes the order members that I'd really respond to when I was younger would be people like, who had lived a full Dharma life, and I wanted to see what effect that had had, and what it means, those people who've gone before me, like Maitreya or Padmashuri or Parami, who've lived a very, very full Dharmic life, taking a lot of responsibility, having a very strong response to the Bodhisattva ideal, and what that looked like in their life a little bit down the road, but maybe not that far.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about when you're in the first part of your life, just the possibilities are really wide, and also I don't think this is inevitable. I'll say that. I don't think this is inevitable. But what seems to happen is, as people age, their sense of possibility narrows. And there's something really wonderful about talking to people who just have a sense of possibility, and they want their life is all in front of them. And they don't think too much about doing something new. Like I remember, I left New Zealand when I was 23, and actually looking back, it was quite difficult. I was quite seriously culture shocked for quite a long period. I didn't realize at the time. And it was all sorts of other challenges that happened, but if I'd known that, and if I'd thought about it too much, I probably wouldn't have left. But leaving was the best thing I ever did. You know what I mean? So there's something about communicating to people in that phase of life, because we do have phases in our lives, and different things come to the fore. And that's one thing that I really, really loved. It was really refreshing. Just to people, you'd say, "Here's the Dharma," and people say, "Okay," rather than like, "Well, what about this, and what about that, and what about the other thing, and you can do it because you're young and you've got all these," and there's none of that. It's just like, "Okay, yeah, we'll give it a go." And the other thing that I really appreciated, and particularly about the first time I went on a young Buddhist retreat, I'd heard all about the beginnings of our movement, back in the 1960s and 70s. And, it was Sangharakshita, who was, like in his late 40s or 50s, and all these young people. And there was people talk about the atmosphere. And when I went on those young Buddhist retreats, I thought, I get it now, because there was this energy of possibility and dynamism and idealism. Idealism is really good. Like sometimes I think we say, someone's very idealistic is almost as a criticism. And I think that's a real shame, because idealism is really, really important. If you haven't got idealism, I mean, you're not fully living what a human being can live. So that's the other thing I really loved. I thought, I get it. I get what it was like. And then I actually had a sense of being part of something, which was a sort of a renaissance of that energy, which was around in the early days. I don't know that for a fact, because I wasn't there in the early days, but it felt like that to me.
Great. So we should start to wrap up, but maybe one last question with like a short, pithy answer from each of you would be: say you're speaking to, assuming everyone in the audience is feeling as I am, sitting here being like, that sounds great, I want to take more responsibility. But not necessarily sure how. What would you say? What would be a word of advice in terms of a next step that one can take to try and take on more responsibility for the situation that we share our own particular context?
It's hard to say what the next step could be without, an individual life. So I suppose what I would say is my one piece of advice is talk to your friends about what next step to take in your situation. Yeah. Which opportunity to take advantage of. And sometimes that really does need a conversation with maybe a number of people that you value their opinion. Yeah. So talk to friends.
The other thing I'd say is that just put yourself out there, make it be known that you want to help with your centre team or whatever, because often we just assume that you're too busy or things like that. And the other thing is, I think just hassle your order members until they give in. I honestly like a lot of the time when you work in the centre, many of you know this already from working and being involved in groups and stuff. There's so much to do that when someone offers something, it's almost too much to take in. But just keep hassling them and saying, "Look, I want to do something until they give you something," and ask for more responsibility than you think you're ready for as well. Just do it. Just do it. Take the chance. And but it is hard to say specifically, or it is hard to speak generally without knowing the needs of your situation. But just find something. And if there's absolutely nothing to do, go and do a Karna appeal, or go and live in a retreat centre, or like this place looks really hopping at the moment with young people, or go to Padmaloka or Tirataloka or something like that. It doesn't have to be in your own situation as well.
I had a thought, and then Vajratara said it, and then I had another thought. Vajratara.
You're so unoriginal, Jnanadhara.
And then I had another thought, thankfully. But I was thinking, actually, one thing you can do, you can always just make friends with people. See who's around. And remember that if you've been around for 6 months, you've been around for 6 months longer than somebody who's just come through the door, and actually you can have an impact. So I think it's really important to remember that. So just make friends with people, because it all comes back. It all comes back to helping people to enter into the Dharma life, and friendship is absolutely crucial to that. So maybe that's one thing just to add.
Okay. That's a good note to end. So thank you very much. Let's put our hands together.